So as you can see here, I've connected my ACR122u to my PC and I'm running my application. The first thing you do is click on this button called the show readers. So this shows all the readers connected to the PC. Right now we have got only one, and the ID of that reader is ACR1220. So I'm going to place a brand new MIFARE Desfire tag which is 8K. So you can buy these tags in three different sizes: 2K, 4K and 8K. And however, the price difference between 4K and 8K is so small, so I'm sure if you look at the price you will end up buying 8K. So keep one thing in mind, these tags are very expensive. I have spoiled so many tags, and every time you waste a tag, you lose a couple of pounds. And probably at the later videos I'm going to show you all the tags I have spoiled, and every time I spoil a tag there is some concept in this, some kind of a mistakes which I'm sure it's worth knowing them. So after you place the tag, click on the connect. So this something I have done something different here. For MIFARE Desfire tags, you have to choose a local folder in a file system, because I'm going to use this folder to keep some useful information, so that it's going to be helpful to users as well. So if you see this window, and you're going to see this window only once, so first I'm going to click on this choose button, and I'm going to choose a folder where all these files will be returned. You can go to that folder and you can see all the things that are returned, but please do not delete or modify anything there. So I'm going to click now on the choose. I've selected this folder called tags in the F drive, and I'm going to save. And as you can see here, at the bottom of the window you see what is your local storage path, and this is the screen you're going to use a lot to learn the Desfire tags. So the way this Desfire tags works is, the very first time when you activate the card, the master file is always selected. So on the top section you will see which is your current folder or application that's selected, and we know from the previous videos the root folder and master files are one and the same. So as you can see here, the master application is already selected. So whenever you click on this get IDs, so this is something very similar to listing the files in a folder. So as you can see here, there are no applications. This is a brand new tag. So first thing you're going to do is create a new application. So every application must have a 3-byte tag. I'm going to give a tag ID as A0, or you can give A2, A1 and 0, or it can also be say A and 0. So let's stick with A0. The next thing is you have to define some of the key settings. So at this stage I would advise you to keep this as it is. So as of now the software doesn't let you do any authentication, so every tag or every file you create is an open access file. You can access without any password. So I'm going to come back to this in the later videos as well. So as I said, when we create application, you can have up to 14 keys, and bear in mind, the more keys you use, it's going to take more memory space. So the documentation of MIFARE Desfire says you can create 28 applications in a card. Again, that depends on the number of keys and other factors. So I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to have this application have only 2 keys. So it doesn't matter, because as I said, there is no authentication in this software as of now, but that will be changed soon. And you have to keep this as it is because we are creating application which is ISO IEC compatible. So you cannot, I'm not letting you to remove this tag. So just it's always ticked. So as I said, if we have to use ISO commands, every application must have the 2-byte file IDs. So I'm going to give this as E and 0. This can be anything, E0, and I'm also going to give an optional 16 bytes. So, or you can keep this. We'll try one more application with this name. So as I said, this DF name is optional. So what we have here is a Desfire ID with AA0 and the FID as E0. After that, click on this create application button. So as you can see here, our first application is created, and on the left side I'm showing you the list of applications in this folder. So that's really easy to create an application. And here you can see that I'm showing you the Desfire ID which you have created here, which you entered here, sorry, the ISO file ID and the ISO ID, which is the DF name, which is also called as ISO application ID, and I'm also going to show the text version of that. So let's try to create one more application here. So if you click on reset, all these fields will go back to the default state. So let's have one more application. This time I'm still going to use EAA, call this as a 1, and I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to have just one key, and here I'm going to keep the default as a des. Here instead of E0 I'm going to have E1. So I'm letting you to enter this DF name either in hexadecimal or as a string. So let's go and put as a string. I would like to call this application as the attendance system, AT. So I can have all caps T here. So ATTENDANCE. So attendance. So as soon as I enter the ASCII here, I'm converting and getting the equivalent hex. So if you create a file now, if I hit this create button, we're going to create one more folder application in this stack. Create, and as you can see here, the listing shows 2 applications, and this application is here. Let's see what has happened in the file system. As I told you, when you learn or when you use this file, I'm going to create a similar file structure within that folder as well. So let's see what that folder has got now. So if you remember, when we started Desfire, we have to enter a local folder, and that is F drive and tags. So inside this folder, so I'll be creating a subfolders with the name as your UID of the tag. So inside that, so we have created 2 applications here with the Desfire ID A0, AA0 and so on. So I got these 2 folders are the 2 applications. So inside the folder there's a file called settings, and these are a text file. So I'm storing this because as of now the software uses only the ISO commands, and using ISO commands you can never get the application properties like the key settings and number of keys and so on. So that's the reason why I am remembering the values here. So if you double click, as you can see here, these values matches what we've entered here. So number of keys is 2, the settings is this, and type is 0, and ISO is true. It has got FID and no DF name. So I'm going to use this file whenever you select a folder. So we have got 2 folders here, And let's try to create one more, just make sure you're comfortable. And this time I'm going to briefly explain you some of these properties here. So click on reset. So I'm going to repeat this so that it's going to be helpful to you. So every application must have a 3-byte Desfire ID. So I'm going to give, you can give B, or you can give B1, or you can give B2, B1 and B0. So you can put anything here because this is your application, and you have to see that this, it's not already present in the tag. So what this setting says is how to change the keys. So as I said, every application can have 14 keys, and in future if you want to change the keys, oh by the way, the default values of the keys are all zeros. So that's what I mentioned in the documentation. So there are so many options here. There are in fact 16 options. In order to change any of these 14 keys, you can decide whether to use the application master key or a specific key. So, or a key 2, key 3, or finally you can also say the last one. It says none of the keys are modifiable, they're all frozen. So probably we choose this option once we have changed all the keys. So the next option is the 0E, the 14, the hex equivalent of 14 is E. So it says using the same key. So it says if I want, what it means is if I have to change the key number 5, I have to first authenticate using key number 5 and change it. So probably in the later videos I'm going to show how to use these things. And the next 4 tick boxes are, it says the key settings. This tells you whether can you change the key settings, yes or no. Okay, this is yes, so I'm going to revert back this to default value. And what it says is, in order to create or delete a file, is it allowed without authentication, yes or no. So as I said, we are going to create all applications and files that are open, so without an authentication. So this is tick, you can't untick at this stage. Probably this is version 1.1, maybe later versions you'll be able to play with this as well. Can we do a directory listing without authentication? It's controlled by this tick, yes or no. It also says the master key. Okay, so is the master key changeable? See the 0th key. So the 0th key of an application is called as a master key. So is this changeable? Okay, in other words, sorry, I just missed a little bit here. As I said, every application can have 14 keys. The key number starts from 0 and goes up to 13. So the 0th key has a special name for that. It's called as application master key. Key number 1, key number 2, and key number up to 14. So they're all just another set of keys. But keep in mind, the 0th key, the first key, is always called as a master key. So when I said that number of keys is 1, it means you can have only the application master key. So you have to keep in mind, you can't set, say application, you need a key number 7 here, but specify application has got only 2 keys, because it doesn't mean at all, because you're saying you need key number 7 but there is no 7th key here. It's only 4 keys. Okay, so what it says is the master key is changeable with authentication. You're going to decide whether you're letting the application change the master key or not. So this is some kind of a customization we do for the application when we give this to the customers. The next settings tells us how many keys you want for this application. You can have 4, you can go up to 14 keys. So keep in mind, the more number of keys, the more storage space is going to take, and you can have less number of applications. So you should always decide how many keys your application require. If you need only one key, just set it to one. The next thing is what kind of cryptographic method you want to use for authentication, whether a single DS or a double 3DS with 2 key, or a 3DS with 3 key, or AES. So you can decide which one you want. And the next bit is whether you want this application to be ISO compatible. So if you don't want, then you don't have to tick this, and when this is not ticked, you don't have to enter the ISO settings at all. So as I mentioned before, this software version 1.1 allows you only ISO applications, so this has to be ticked. So let's try one more. This time, just to make, as I mentioned before, every time I test a Desfire card, it's going to go to the bin. Eventually I'm going to lose a couple of pounds. So I'm going to make this 14 and just make some changes here. Keep in mind, you should not use anything other than 0. Okay, basically none of these keys will be used. Okay, so keep this as 5. So it means to make the changes, key changes, you need to authenticate with 5. So I'm going to give this time, say, you can give the same number, say B1 B0, and because the B1 B0 is not used here, so I would like to give this as say for example a canteen app, CANTEEN. Assume that this card is used for 2 applications, one for attendance system and the next one could be for a canteen or something else. So when I hit this create button, the software sends all the commands required to create this application. So we have got 3 applications here with all these values. So next I'm going to show you how to create the data files. So this is the operation is very similar to the way you work with the PC. So before you create a file, we always change to a folder. So here I've got the master application selected. So first I'm going to choose the application inside which I want to create data files. Let us go and choose the first one and click on this, and click after that select application. So on the top you can see what's your current application, and if you want to retrieve the list of files from the tag, the first thing you have to do is click this get application IDs. As the message says, there are no files. So as of this version, you can create only 2 types of files. In fact, sorry, 4 types of files: the standard backup, linear, and cyclic. So you cannot create the value files, not in this version. So as I mentioned before, every file will have 1 byte of ID that's called, that's a Desfire ID, and we are creating files which are compatible with ISO operations, so this is ticked. I'm not letting you untick that. And as I said in my PowerPoint slides, every file must have a 2 byte ID. So you can give anything. I can give 0 or 1. So, and after that you have to decide what kind of access rights you need, what kind of encryption method you need when you read the data. I'm going to keep this everything as the default values here. It says the communication is plain text, there's no encryption, and read access is free access. That means no authentication required to read this file. Write access is also free, no authentication required to write to this file. And read and write also free access. And change this access thread itself is a free, you can change anytime. So I'm going to choose the standard file, the file size, which is very important. I'm going to give the smallest file size 32 bytes. Some documentation says even if the file size you mentioned 10, internally it's going to store or reserve 32 bytes of memory. So you can put whatever value you like, but there is some limitations. So try to keep it 32 for the time being. And the first step you do is click this button called create file. So when I hit this button, the necessary commands are sent to the tag and that creates a file. So the message says create standard data file. Okay, so that's it. You can also create a few more. So let's try to have one more file with 02 and 0002, and this time I'm going to create a backup file. So 32, and say keep in mind 02 is a backup file. So we got two files here. The next thing is we have to write something. So I want to put some data inside this file. So the way you do that in this software is click the file. On the top right you can see the current file, which is xxx. That means no file is selected. So click on the file and hit this button called select file. So it says your current file is 001, and we know that 01 is a data file or standard file, and here you can read and write. So the way you write a data file is you can give an offset. So offset is like a, see, keep in mind we have a data file which is 32 bytes in size. So I can start writing from offset 0, or I can also say, for example, start from some in between, say something like this. You can think this file has got a 32 bytes. So it all depends on what you want to do, depends on applications. So I can start writing from here. This is the 0th offset. If you want to start writing somewhere from in between, say offset 10, you can do that as well, but you can't write more than 32 bytes, so that will be an error. So I'm going to keep it the default value 0. Let us try to write some data. If you are coming from a software development, we all use a lot of lorem ipsum. So this is what we use to generate some random text. I'm going to generate a 32 bytes some lorem ipsum data, and this is the one. I'm just going to copy this. I don't know whether dot is part of that. Let's copy that as well and paste here. Okay, and the button here is called as update binary. This name is what you find in IS4 documentation. So we are trying to write something to a file. So when you hit this button, so something must have happened there. The message says write data. Okay, so this is my own message. So something has been written there. In order to read, we use this this section below. It's called read file. Again, we're going to keep this as it is. So I'm going to read something from offset 0 and click this read binary. So this binary word is used often, so that it also means probably these standard files are the binary files. So when you click this read binary, you can see that whatever we have written, it has come back. So let us try to write somewhere in between. Say for example I want to write from offset 10, I want to write this word lorem as well. So from offset 10, so we are going to write the word lorem. So this will be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so you can write any number of times. So click on update, it says write data successful. If you click on read, you can see that this word lorem is somewhere here. You can also read from a different offset. Say I want to read from offset 20, I want to read 5 bytes. So if you do that, read, so you can see that you read. What if I gave 50 bytes? Obviously that will be an error message. So we say read. So it says these messages are what you see in the documentation. Conditions to use not satisfied. The good thing about the Desfire is whenever there is an error, say you can just send this command again, it's fine. Okay, whereas if you have worked with the previous tags, when there's an error, you should the tag goes back to the idle state or a reset state. You have to again activate the tag. But one way, the Desfire are much better to use. Any error, it always go back to the previous working conditions. So what you saw is how to write and read the text file. There's no difference between writing and reading for a standard and a standard backup file, not from the point of ISO operations. However, if you actually use the Desfire command, there's a difference. So you can just try just for practicing. So if you want to work on different file, keep in mind, first click on the file and say select file, so that you make that file as your current file. And we know that it is 32 bytes as well. So go and get some more lorem ipsum. So this time generate one more set. If you don't want to start with lorem ipsum, you can remove this tag. Generate. So let's try to generate more. I don't know what I've done there. Just a minute. Say take 100 bytes. Don't know if I've done any validation. So I'm going to take 100 bytes and try to put the 100 bytes here. In fact, this is an error because our file size is only 32 bytes long. If I try to write now, you got some error message, so that shows. So let's try to put something less than 32. Just put this, say update. It said write OK. So we have not written 32 bytes, probably is less than 32 bytes. Let's try to read. So as you can see here, we have consumed only probably around 15 bytes. The remaining bytes are initialized to the zeros. So one way it's good. And I've provided few options here. You can see the data and hex, and as you can see, we never wrote these zeros. However, looks like whenever you write to a file, the first time you write to a file, if the data is less than the length of this file, it's padded with zeros. So you can see the hex equivalent or ASCII, and if you don't want to see this thing, you can probably it's the other way. So yeah, sorry. So while you are in the ASCII mode, if you don't want to see this null string characters, you can just remove it. Okay, so what we saw just now is how to write to a file and read from the file. If you go back, if you want to select different application, if you go back here, I have grayed out all these buttons because you have to first go back to the master file and then select a different applications. So when you click this button, you always select the master file, and these buttons get enabled. So let's select this time second file, select file. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Okay, I'm going to take this tag out. Let's try to do it again. So I'm going to place the tag, connect. As you can see here, you didn't see that dialog box to enter this path, and the master file is selected. Get IDs. There are actually two commands. You have to click on get DF names also. So keep in mind you have to press this first and this after that. So all the information what you see here is retrieved from the Desfire tag. However, when you change these files, this information about the keys and other thing, they all coming from the folder here. So this folder. Okay, so I forgot to mention something else here as well. So whenever you create a file inside a folder, I also create the files here with the same file ID. If you open this file, you will see all the file properties which are not possible to get it from ISO commands. So the first file type is 0, it's a standard file, communication 0, read is the 14 entry. All the values you enter on the screen is stored here, and this is what I use whenever you change these files, or when you change entries, go to files and change, all this auto populated. So this time I'm going to select the second application. The very first thing you do is try to get the list of the IDs. So there are no files here, so there's nothing here. Okay, so it's the same process. Let's this time create the linear files. So I'm going to have 0 1 again, even though I have got 0 1 in my other application. So as I mentioned before, these IDs, file IDs, must be unique within an application. So 0 1 and file ID is, I can give a 0 1, I can give 1 and 1 as well, sorry, 1 and 1, and I'm going to keep this. Let's see what exactly these are. So how do you, when the data is transferred from the tag to the reader, or reader to the tag, how you want it to transfer in the air? It is a plain text, or using DES encryption with the marking, or DES or 3DS with enciphered. And you can also decide here how you want, if you want to protect the read access by a key. So if you remember, the way the keys are always set when application is created. So we know that every application can have 14 keys. So here you can decide. So assume that I want to allow read operation only when the reader authenticates with key number 4. I want to allow write operation only after authenticating with key number 6. I want to let read and write only when authenticate with 1. So read and write covers both read and write as well. And I want somebody to change these settings itself only after authenticating with key 16 or 13. So it's 12. Okay, now you have to keep in mind the number of keys you use here, okay, must match the how many keys you have set when application is created. So let's revert back, click on the reset, get back to all initial state. I'm going to do 1 and 1. So I'm going to have a linear file. The way you create linear file is you have to give the size of the file. So I'm going to give 32 bytes in each record, and I want maximum, say, 5 records. So if you calculate if you multiply these two numbers, you'll come to know we have using 160 bytes altogether. So create. Now a file is created, and as you can see here, the message says linear file create. Okay, let's also create one more file with, let's try to create one more with the same name and see what message you get. So if I try to create, it says, so this is the error code. It says creation of a file or application failed because the file or application with the same number already exists. So this proves you can't have more than one file with the same ID. So I'm going to make this as 2, and just have to change, make this unique. So I'm going to set 02, and this time cyclic. So I'm going to have, say, 10 records here for cyclic. So create. And if you notice here, even though there is an error, I don't have to go and restart or reactivate the card. I can just continue, enter the command again, and everything works fine. So This is how you create the classic the linear and cyclic files. So next I'm going to show you how to read and write the data for these files.